When you picture a negotiation, I bet you probably imagine this massive, sweat-drenched tug of war.
Oh, absolutely.
Like two people gripping opposite ends of a thick, muddy rope, heels dug into the dirt, just yanking with everything they've got until someone basically face plants.
I mean, it is exhausting just thinking about it,
Right.
but that visual perfectly captures the zero-sum mentality that most of us bring to the table. We walk into a room believing it's a test of brute strength.
Yeah, we either pull the other person across our line or, we get dragged through the mud. And I always thought of negotiation as that adversarial struggle. Honestly, it makes me dread the process.
Sure.
Because whether you were asking your boss for a raise or trying to close on a house or even just attempting to get a toddler to eat their vegetables.
Which is the hardest negotiation of all.
It really is. But if you treat all those everyday situations like a tug of war, you are going to end up exhausted and probably eating a lot of cold broccoli.
Which is the core problem. We have this deep-seated haggling mindset that, well, it sets us up for failure before we even open our mouths.
Yeah.
But in this deep dive into the science of negotiation and conflict resolution, we are going to look at some fascinating research that completely flips that script.
And we are pulling from a really great stack of sources today. We've got Harvard's program on negotiation, research out of IMD Business School, and some landmark texts like Getting to Yes, Never Split the Difference and Difficult Conversations.
It is a heavy-hitting lineup.
Yeah.
And the overarching lesson across all these sources is a radical shift in strategy. It isn't about pulling the rope harder. It is about dropping the rope entirely.
Dropping the rope. I love that imagery, but it is much easier said than done.
Oh, totally.
Let's unpack how we actually do that. Because when I sit down at a car dealership or when I'm staring across the table at someone who wants the exact same limited budget I want, dropping the rope feels like giving up.
That is the natural fear,
Yeah.
To understand why it's not giving up, we have to look at the bedrock of modern negotiation theory.
Okay.
Back in the early 80s, researchers Roger Fisher and William Ury published a wildly influential book called Getting to Yes. They introduced a framework designed specifically to move us away from traditional positional bargaining.
And what's the core of that framework?
The real magic of their approach lies in a single vital distinction, and that is the difference between positions and interests.
Break that down for me. What is the functional difference between a position and an interest? Because right now, if I go into a negotiation, I usually just state what I want. That's my position, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. A position is what you say you want. An interest is the underlying reason why you want it.
Okay.
It is the need, the desire, or, the fear driving that demand. When people argue over positions, they get stuck.
Because they're just clashing over the what?
Right. They lock horns because positions are usually mutually exclusive. But when you dig into the underlying interests, you suddenly open up a whole new landscape of possible solutions.
So it's about shifting the conversation from the what's to the why.
Precisely that. Let's look at a classic example from Ho-Wan Jung's research on negotiation. Imagine two children fighting over a single orange.
Okay.
The positional approach to the tug-of-war is that they both demand the whole orange. If a parent steps in and forces a traditional compromise, what happens? They cut the orange in half. Both kids get 50%.
It seems perfectly fair. Nobody gets everything, but nobody leaves empty-handed.
It looks fair on the surface, sure,
Right.
but it is actually a completely suboptimal outcome.
Why?
Because if you stop and ask the kids why they want the orange, if you focus on their interests instead of their rigid positions, you might find out something interesting.
Like what?
Well, one kid is thirsty and wants to squeeze the orange for juice. The other kid is trying to bake a cake and only needs the peel for zest.
Oh, wow, right.
So if you divide it based on interests, one gets 100% of the juice and the other gets 100% of the peel. They both get exactly what they want, no compromise necessary. It sounds incredibly simple, almost like a children's fable, but this exact dynamic plays out on massive geopolitical scales, too.
Really? Like where?
Take the 1978 Camp David Accords between Egypt and Israel. The conflict over the Sinai Peninsula looked utterly intractable.
How so?
Egypt's stated position was that they wanted every inch of the Sinai returned. Israel's stated position was that they were keeping some of it. It was a classic standoff.
A literal geopolitical tug-of-war.
Exactly. But when mediators started focusing on the interests beneath those positions, the landscape shifted. Egypt's underlying interest was sovereignty.
Because it was their historical land.
Right, the land had been there since the time of the pharaohs, and giving it up was a massive blow to their national identity. Israel's underlying interest, however, was security.
Ah, I see.
They simply did not want Egyptian tanks sitting right on their border.
So they didn't necessarily need to own the land, they just needed to feel safe from an attack originating from it.
Yes. And that realization birthed a solution for mutual gain. They returned the entire Sinai Peninsula to Egyptian sovereignty, satisfying Egypt's core interest.
But they probably put conditions on it.
They did. They mandated that large areas of it remain completely demilitarized, which satisfied Israel's core interests. Both sides won, even though their initial positions were completely incompatible.
Okay, the orange analogy and the Sinai example are great for illustrating the concept, but I had to push back here a little bit.
Please do.
Isn't this focus on interests a bit utopian? I mean, in the real world, someone usually has to lose. If I am buying a used car, every dollar I manage to knock off the price is a dollar the dealership loses.
Yeah, that's a very fair point.
There is no magical peel and juice scenario there. Doesn't this method assume everyone is playing nice and looking out for mutual benefit?
That is a very sharp critique, and actually you are far from the first person to point that out. The getting to yes model has faced significant academic scrutiny over the years.
I'm glad I'm not the only cynic.
Not at all. James J. White, a prominent law professor, argued exactly what you were suggesting. He pointed out that this framework heavily glosses over what is called distributive bargaining.
Distributive bargaining, so that's the zero-sum stuff.
Right, those purely zero-sum situations where a gain for one genuinely is a loss for the other, like the car price you mentioned.
Or dividing a limited bonus pool at work.
Exactly. Critics also note that principled negotiation often ignores the harsh reality of power struggles. It assumes a predominantly Western perspective of rationality.
Meaning it relies on the idea that everyone at the table is going to calmly analyze interests and problem solve together.
Yes. But if one side hold all the leverage, or if they are acting completely irrationally, politely asking about their interests isn't going to save you.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when the other party doesn't care about your interests? You can't just sit there holding a peelless orange while the other side takes your wallet. You need some kind of safety net.
You absolutely do. And in negotiation theory, your strongest safety net is your BATNA.
BATNA.
Yes. That stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. It is the definitive answer to the question, what will I do if I walk away from this table with no deal?
So the golden rule would be never accepting a deal that is worse than your safety net.
In theory, yes. But the mistake people make is treating their BATNA like a vague emotional backup plan. Calculating your BATNA actually requires rigorous, objective assessment to establish a firm reservation value.
Reservation value.
That is your absolute mathematically sound walkaway point. You have to translate your alternative into the same terms as the deal on the table so you aren't comparing apples to oranges.
And the sources outline a pretty brutal story of someone who failed to do this math.
Oh, Jim Shapiro.
Yes, Jim Shapiro. He owned 49% of a construction company, right? And his business partner wanted to buy him out.
Correct.
So after a lot of haggling, the partner offered $8.5 million. Shapiro, looking at the company's total value, felt he was entitled to closer to $10 million.
Entitlement is a dangerous feeling in negotiation.
It really is. Because out of pure righteous indignation, he rejected the $8.5 million and decided to take his partner to court.
He let his feelings obscure his actual alternative. He didn't translate his BATNA into an expected value. Let's break down the reality of his safety net.
Let's do the math.
His lawyers estimated a 70% chance of winning in court, where he would get his $10 million.
Okay, let me see if I can follow the expected value here. You take the 70% chance of $10 million, which is $7 million.
Right. But they also noted a 30% chance of losing, where he would only get $3 million.
Okay, so you add the 30% chance of $3 million, which is $900,000. That gives you $7.9 million total.
Yep. And on top of that, he was facing $500,000 in legal fees.
So you subtract the $500,000 in legal fees, leaving his actual expected value from going to court at only $7.4 million.
Exactly. He rejected a guaranteed $8.5 million for an alternative that was statistically worth only $7.4 million. He went to trial, lost years of his life to the stress of litigation, and deeply regretted it later. He failed to establish an objective reservation value and basically let his emotions drive the bus off the cliff.
But building a safety net isn't just about analyzing your own options, is it? You also have to obsessively figure out the other party's BATNA.
That is where you uncover the hidden value in a deal. You have to know how much they need you. There was a fascinating case study about a Mississippi farmer in the 1990s.
Right, the state had just legalized riverboat gambling.
Yes, and this farmer owned prime riverfront land. An agricultural assessment valued the land at $3 million. An entrepreneur came along and offered him $7 million.
Which already seems amazing.
Right. After some aggressive haggling, the farmer sold it for $8.5 million.
The farmer probably thought he hit the absolute jackpot. I mean, he got almost 3 times what his land was worth agriculturally.
He felt like a master negotiator, but he completely failed to assess the entrepreneur's safety net.
What was the entrepreneur's alternative?
Well, if the farmer had done his research, he would have realized that for a massive casino developer, this specific plot was the absolute optimal location. The entrepreneur's alternative, their BTNA, was finding a second best location that would have cost them tens of millions of dollars in lost revenue over time.
Oh, man. That hurts to hear. If the farmer knew that the developer's alternative was to lose tens of millions of dollars, he could have asked for significantly more than $8.5 million.
Assessing the other side's BATNA shifts the entire paradigm. You stop focusing on what you think your asset is worth in a vacuum and start focusing on what it is worth to them specifically.
Okay, let me throw a hypothetical at you, though. Let's say I spend a ton of time and energy building up a rock-solid safety net. Maybe I am interviewing for jobs, and I work tirelessly to get 2 amazing competing offers in my pocket before I sit down with my top choice company.
Sounds like a great position to be in.
Right. But could having that incredibly strong safety net actually backfire? Like, could it make me overconfident or cause me to act like a jerk at the table because I feel invincible?
That is a phenomenal observation. Francesca Gino, a researcher at Harvard Business School, has studied this exact phenomenon. She refers to it as the hidden hazard of BATNA development.
The hidden hazard.
Yes. When you invest massive amounts of time, energy, and sunk costs into developing outside options, it creates a powerful psychological sense of entitlement.
Because I put in the work, I subconsciously feel like I deserve a massive win.
You feel you have earned a highly favorable outcome regardless of the actual market conditions. Gino's research shows that this entitlement often fuels opportunistic, aggressive, and sometimes even unethical behavior at the negotiation table.
Wow, unethical.
Yeah. You might lie about your options or use extreme hardball tactics because your brain tells you that you are justified in getting what you deserve. Your safety net can quickly turn you into the villain of the negotiation.
So principled negotiation gives us a framework for finding mutual value.
Yeah.
And calculating a BATNA gives us a realistic safety net. But what happens when standard business logic goes completely out the window? What if the person sitting across from me is highly emotional, totally irrational, or in extreme cases, literally holding hostages?
And you have a real problem on your hands.
Yeah, because I can't exactly slide a spreadsheet of expected values across the table and hope they calm down.
No. Logic is useless in those moments. When emotions are running that hot, we have to look to the extremes for guidance. The tactics used by the FBI's Crisis Negotiation Unit are incredibly revealing for handling everyday, high-stakes conversations where rationality has failed.
The sources delve into the work of Gary Nosner, the retired head of that FBI unit. He talks about something called the behavioral change stairway.
It is a strict progression. You don't just walk in and try to influence an irrational person. You have to start with active listening.
Okay.
That active listening eventually leads to empathy. Empathy slowly builds rapport. And only once you have established rapport can you finally exert influence.
And Nosner emphasizes a crucial element that traditional business negotiators often struggle with, which is the strategic use of stalling.
Yes. We are wired in the corporate world to think of deadlines as effective tools to force a decision. But in a crisis, time is the negotiator's most powerful tool.
How does stalling actually help, though? If my boss is demanding an answer by 5 p.m., how does letting the clock run do anything but make them angrier?
Well, it is about the biology of emotion. A person's rage, anxiety, and emotional volatility almost always subside as time passes.
Really?
Yeah, the human body simply cannot sustain a state of peak physiological arousal indefinitely. If you let them vent, if you actively listen without countering, you let the clock cool their nervous system down.
Nosner provides a stark example of what happens when authorities fail to understand this. He critiques the FBI's approach during the 1993 Waco siege.
He calls it a flawed linear approach.
Right. They tried negotiating first. And when the cult members weren't moving fast enough, the authorities grew impatient. effectively dropped the negotiations and sent in tactical teams with tanks and tear gas.
Which sends a completely mixed, counterproductive message. It is the equivalent of saying, we want to deeply understand your needs, but also here is a tank.
Yeah, that doesn't really build trust.
Not at all. Nosner advocates for a parallel approach. You negotiate in good faith, letting time do its work, while simultaneously preparing your tactical options in the background.
So in a daily context, it means you don't abruptly flip from being a cooperative listener to an aggressive threat maker the moment things stall.
Exactly. Consistency is key.
When it comes to the actual words you use in these tense moments, the sources bring in former FBI lead hostage negotiator Chris Voss. He champions a concept he calls tactical empathy.
Yes.
And it is wild to read about because it focuses entirely on hacking the human brain's predictable responses.
Voss uses very specific psychological techniques to bypass a person's defensive filters. One of the most famous is mirroring.
Right.
He suggests simply repeating the last three words the other person just said, using an upward, inquisitive vocal inflection, and then going completely silent.
Why does simply repeating 3 words work so well? I mean, it sounds almost too simplistic.
It exploits a couple of psychological triggers. First, it makes the person feel deeply listened to without you having to formulate a complex, validating response.
Interesting.
Second, human beings are incredibly uncomfortable with conversational silence. When you mirror and pause, the other person feels an overwhelming urge to fill that silence, usually by elaborating and revealing more underlying information.
He also talks about a technique called baiting the no.
Mm,
In normal life, we are constantly trying to get people to say yes to us. We say, do you have a few minutes, or can we agree on this?
right.
But Voss points out that pushing for a yes makes people defensive. They feel like they're being trapped into a commitment.
So Voss suggests flitching the script to trigger a no. Instead of asking for a few minutes, you ask, is this a bad time to talk?
And giving them the opportunity to say no makes them feel safe. Why is that?
Because saying no triggers a sense of autonomy and protection. It makes the person feel like they are in control of the boundaries. But by asking, is this a bad time? Their protective no actually translates into an agreement to engage.
So they say, no, it's not a bad time.
Exactly. You have guided them into a conversation while making them feel like they are the ones setting the rules.
That's brilliant. There's another psychological trigger mentioned in the sources that blew my mind regarding social proof. It comes from an infomercial writer named Colleen Sott.
Oh, this is a great one.
She changed a single line in a television ad campaign from "Operators are waiting, please call now" to "If operators are busy, please call again."
It is a masterclass in subtle linguistic shifting.
Because "operators are waiting" paints a mental picture of a bunch of bored people sitting around an empty call center. It implies low demand.
Right. But if operators are busy, instantly manufactures social proof. It creates a mental image of a frenzy. Everyone else must be buying this product, so I need to act fast before they run out.
It is the exact same product, but the psychological landscape of the decision has been completely rewritten.
Exactly.
I have to say, though, looking at Voss's tactical empathy and these psychological hacks,
Yeah.
well, it feels a bit manipulative.
I can see that.
He is using mirroring to simulate a deep connection without actually having to care about the person on a human level. It is highly effective, but very detached.
It is detached, and that distinction is vital. Contrast Voss's FBI approach with Stuart Diamond, another negotiation expert in our sources.
Okay.
Diamond strongly advocates for building a genuine personal connection to put the other party at ease. Voss, dealing with life or death crises, argues that you do not need to be someone's friend to profoundly understand every perspective and use it to reach your goal.
Voss is also pretty blunt in his critique of the Harvard getting to yes model. He argues that you cannot sit down and devise a mutually beneficial, rational win-win solution with a hostage taker who genuinely believes he is the Messiah.
And he is absolutely correct in that context. The fact that human beings can be hacked psychologically proves that emotions and biology dictate outcomes far more often than logic does.
Yeah.
This reality brings us to the most intimate and often the most difficult level of negotiation, the everyday hard conversations we have with coworkers, spouses, or neighbors.
The ones that usually fail before they even start because of the internal unspoken dialogue.
Yes. This is unpacked brilliantly in the book Difficult Conversations by Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. They reveal that whenever you are having a tense talk, You aren't just having one conversation. You are actually juggling three deeper conversations simultaneously.
Three conversations at once. The first layer they identify is the what happened conversation. This is the battle over truth, intent, and blame. We always assume our own intentions are benign, but when we feel hurt by someone else, we immediately assume their intentions were malicious.
Exactly. Then the second layer is the feelings conversation. Are my emotions valid? Are theirs?
And people often try to suppress their feelings in professional settings, don't they?
They do, but those emotions inevitably leak out as harsh judgments or passive aggression.
But the third layer is the one that really resonated with me. They call it the identity conversation.
Mhm.
This is the internal crisis happening silently inside your own head while you are talking.
Let's explore what that actually looks like. Imagine you are confronting a colleague who took credit for a major project you completed.
Okay.
You are trying to discuss the facts, but internally, your identity conversation is spiraling. You are asking yourself, if I complain about this, doesn't mean I am a petty, jealous person. If I don't speak up, doesn't mean I am a pushover who isn't competent enough to defend my own work.
That's so real.
Yeah.
Hard conversations threaten our core sense of who we are. It makes total sense why we get so defensive.
It does.
To combat this, the author suggests shifting from a blame map to a contribution map. Blame is backward-looking and focuses entirely on punishing someone. Contribution is forward-looking and focuses on causality.
A great way to understand this is a stolen car.
Okay.
If you leave your car unlocked on the street and it gets stolen, you are not to blame for the theft. The thief is fully to blame.
Right, obviously.
However, leaving the door unlocked contributed to the situation occurring. Acknowledging your own contribution to a messy dynamic instantly lowers the other person's defensive shields.
Okay, understanding my own identity crisis and my contribution is helpful internally. But how do I actually open my mouth and start the conversation without the other person immediately getting their guard up?
That is the tricky part.
Because if I walk up to that colleague and say, we need to talk about you stealing my credit, those shields are going right up.
Yes, they are. This is where the framework introduces the third story. You do not open the conversation from your perspective because that sounds like an attack.
Makes sense.
And you do not try to fake opening it from their perspective because that sounds patronizing. You open it from the perspective of a neutral third-party observer who is simply describing the discrepancy between your two views.
I really like that framing. So instead of, you stole my credit, you would approach them and say, I think we have very different perspectives on how the leadership team was briefed on this project, and I would love to sit down and understand how you saw it unfold.
Beautifully said. You are inviting them to join you in exploring the gap between your realities rather than demanding they defend their reality against your attack.
It's so much less aggressive.
And as you have these conversations, you have to adapt your strategy based on who is sitting across from you. Professor Suzanne de Genoz from IMD outlines a persuasion map for this exact purpose. She categorizes listeners based on your underlying relationship with them and their alignment with your goal.
You have your allies who already agree with you and have a strong relationship with you. Then you have Confederates who agree with your goal but maybe don't know you very well.
Right, and they usually need public, active commitments to stay on board.
Got it.
Then there are opposers. These are people you have a good relationship with, but they fundamentally disagree with your idea.
How do you handle them?
With them, you need to lean heavily on active listening and sometimes simply agree to disagree to preserve the trust.
Okay.
Adversaries, on the other hand, disagree with you and don't trust you. They require exclusive information and clear, tangible benefits to be swayed.
That makes total sense.
The key takeaway is that you cannot use the same logical arguments on an adversary that you would use on an ally. You have to manage the trust level, not just the raw facts.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today. We started by dropping the tug-of-war rope and moving away from haggling over rigid positions, learning to focus on the underlying interests that actually drive behavior.
We learned how to build a realistic safety net by calculating the expected value of our BATNA while being cautious of the hidden hazard of entitlement that can make us act unethically.
We looked at how FBI hostage negotiators use the progression of active listening and empathy, alongside tactical stalling and mirroring, to hack the human brain when logic completely fails.
Yes.
And finally, we unpack the hidden layers of difficult conversations, realizing that managing our own internal identity crisis and opening with the neutral third story is how we keep everyday conflicts from derailing.
It is a profound shift from seeing negotiation as a zero-sum battle of wills to seeing it as a structured process of discovery, biological management, and strategic influence.
So your call to action this week is to put this into practice. The next time you face a tough conversation, whether you're asking for a project extension at work or dealing with a frustrated partner at home over household chores, try framing the opening with the third story. Step back, describe the difference between your perspectives neutrally, and invite them to figure out the gap with you.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. We spent a lot of time discussing tactical empathy, mirroring, and mapping out the psychological triggers of the people across from us.
Yeah.
If the ultimate power in negotiation is understanding the other person's reality and biology better than they do, well, are the most effective negotiators just weaponized empaths?
Wow.
When you know exactly what someone else is feeling and you know the precise words to trigger their sense of psychological safety, the line between forming a deep human connection and executing deep psychological manipulation becomes incredibly thin.
It really does. It makes you wonder who is actually holding the rope, and if the rope was ever really there at all.